Hello and welcome to the fourth and final webinar in the current series. Today we're going to be looking at the future of the digital tourist. I'm Ian Forsyth and with me is Stephen Whitelaw, who's a digital consultant. Actually, that's a good starting point, Stephen. Tell us a bit about what you do.
I do a lot of consulting, I do a lot of workshops, and it's an interesting one because I do get introduced to some quite odd things. In the States, they call me a digital evangelist. So when I get introduced, I always feel very religious. Here it's digital consultant, marketing consultant, but it's digital's my background in technology, so digital technology stuff. So I do website analysis and e-commerce work
Right.
in a number of sectors, including tourism.
And I noticed, looking at your Twitter feed, I noticed some of your more recent tweets. You were talking about things like pilotless aeroplanes and the need for passports disappearing, and obviously today we're going to be looking at what the future might hold. But before we do that, just kind of casting an eye over your shoulder for a second and looking back at the last 2 or 3 years, what do you reckon are the kind of standouts in terms of technology from a tourism perspective? What are the things that have happened that have made a big difference to the industry?
I think the growth of mobile is enormous, and the adoption of mobile, and again the way we expect mobile is just phone numbers and people living on their phones and living online. Their whole life is living online. Sharing is a huge thing, so sharing in all the social media platforms. Lots of tourism organisations have adopted that, the ones that are benefiting are embracing it. So it's the huge, enormous growth of social media and the growth of mobile. So people are constantly online. I think that's an enormous movement that's happened, and it's unstoppable.
And you mentioned, when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned this whole notion of kind of user-generated content and what that seems to be doing. I take it that is connected to the whole mobile?
Absolutely, yeah. The user-generated movement's been happening for a long time, and Expedia own Travelocity and own TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor's user-generated content. Airbnb is user-generated content. They sell more night stays than the Hilton Hotel now. So user-generated is everywhere. Some people have come a cropper with user-generated content, but you need to embrace it. You need to understand it.
So businesses out there, if they're looking to try and kind of capitalise on kind of where we are now, mobile and user-generated content, are they the two biggies?
Yeah, huge movement, and it's unstoppable, and it's constantly connected. Everybody's constantly connected.
Okay, well, we'll come back to those again shortly, but first of all, we spoke to Audrey McLennan, the Senior Tourism Development Manager at Highlands and Highlands Enterprise, about the future of digital tourism and her take on it. So let's go over and hear what Audrey had to say.
Globally, mobile data traffic grew by 81% last year, and by the end of this year the number of mobile connected devices will exceed the number of people on Earth. And this trend alone means that most travellers around the world are much more technology savvy than they were in the past. Actually, the reality is that these things are moving so fast and will never stop to enable you to catch up. But it's hard not to be amazed about the exciting developments that are already being tried and tested in our tourism world. And I'm sure you will be hearing about some of these during today's webinar session. And these continuous changes and different ways of doing business can present new opportunities for your business. But to make this a reality, you do need to be prepared for what lies ahead. And most of all, think about how these future trends can help you differentiate yourself from the competition. So it's really important to keep up to speed with new technology and how it might change visitor expectations from your business and your destination. Subscribe to marketing technology newsletters that are recommended by trusted sources such as Tourism Intelligence Scotland and others in your peer group. But most importantly, find like-minded people to talk about and discuss this fascinating subject. And if you're not yet a registered member of Tourism Intelligence Scotland, make sure to sign up now.
So, as Audrey said there, it's really important to make sure that you keep up to date with what's going on. Ultimately, if you don't, then you begin to lose a bit of competitive edge out there in the marketplace, because if you're not, somebody else will be. Stephen, how do you think, I think an interesting starting point for this subject has to be the expectations of visitors and how those have shifted over the years. I know we talked about mobile there, but what do you think are the big things from a tourist's perspective in terms of how things have shifted in recent years?
I think the modern, certainly the younger tourists, this Gen X, Gen Y that are growing up, are expecting a personalised, customised experience. If you look at targeting technologies over the last few years, consumer behaviour, it used to be, we know they're male and they're retired and, that sort of thing. big travel operators in the States are now working on like 50 personas. They know a lot about their customers. They know what they're doing, when they're arriving. They know everything about them. They've researched their customers, and there's that generation coming through. They expect the personalised experience.
Yeah.
It's very easy to find all that information out. You can find tons of information about your customers before they arrive. You can research them. It's all public information on Twitter, you know, where they live, you know, their habits, so you can personalise an experience for them. There's actually hotels that, Twitter hotels and Instagram hotels, they specialise in all this. They take it to another extreme.
Right.
You know, the decoration on the walls is all your images. It's bizarre, but
that's one end of the scale.
Yeah. But the visitors are expecting a bespoke, custom experience. You know, that you know, some random individual just arriving.
But as ever with all of this stuff, and we'll probably touch on this more as we talk about keeping up to date with technology, but you said there's all that data out there, it's all available. The difficulty people often face is having the time, to look and to know where to look. What would your advice be there in terms of building up data about potential customers or customers quickly?
It's tricky. There are lots of tools out there that allow you to do things. There's competitor analysis tools, there's consumer behaviour tools. There's one called Consumer Barometer, and it tells you about people and what they're doing. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
So consumerbarometer.com. There's a tool called spyfu.com. You can find out what your competitors are doing, what words they're buying and who they're advertising to, how many visitors they've got in their hotel, their ethnicity, their age, how many kids they've got, how educated they are. So this is your competitors you can find all about. Very, very powerful. Things like SpyFu, consumer behaviour, SimilarWeb. So these tools are there. But you're right, it's quite an effort to keep up to date. You do have to, I think it was Charles Darwin that said it's not the most intelligent species that survives, it's not the strongest species, it's the one that's most adaptable to change. He was talking about nature and animals, but it applies to tourism businesses. You have to change. You have to be adaptable to change. Things will change, unfortunately, so you do have to keep up to date.
Right.
There's lots of really good sites, and there's one that's a chap from Bankery in Scotland called Mashable.com. It's just a blog, but it's a wonderful blog. It keeps you up to date with all the social stuff.
Right.
It's great. It's very easy to read. It's easy to consume. You can visit it and send you emails. So there's lots of resources out there to help keep you up to date, but you do have to keep up to date, and you have to keep changing. Because unfortunately, with social media, terrible thing to teach, because you know you prepare all your notes and you go into the lecture, it's actually all changed since last night. So it's difficult to keep up to date, but you do have to invest the time. It's your marketing, it's your business, it's your life. So it's not just a little extra nice thing. It's very, very important.
You'll be left behind if you don't.
Yes,
I think you mentioned a lot of resources there just in that one kind of answer. One of the things we will maybe ask you to do at the end is to put as many of those as we can remember that you've referred to. Obviously people can come back to the watch agains, but it would be good to have that in at the end, so we'll get you to do that when we're finished, if that's okay. In terms of preparing for the future though, I mean, that is, I mentioned a crystal ball earlier on. What on earth does the average business do to try and prepare for the future if they don't even know what's round the corner? What would your advice be on that?
I think, kind of coming back to basics, I talked about social media. If you don't care, you know, caring is a very interesting business model. If you care, you'll be found out. The news will spread. These guys are good on social media. If you don't care, you'll also be found out. So social media will destroy your business if you have a poor product. I don't believe many people do, but if you do, you'll be destroyed, and social media will, you will do very well. Good news spreads fast. I think we're living through the largest increase in expressive capability in the history of mankind. We're living in a revolution, and often when you're in a revolution, you can't see it. So there's been about 4 periods in the last, say, 500 years where media's changed so much that I would say it's a revolution. I think the printing press with, you know, movable typewriters, you know, changed the world, and the telegraph, followed by recorded media, and then we harnessed the electromagnetic spectrum, TV and radio pop out. They were all 20th century. They were all one-to-one or one-to-many relationships at best. This is the 21st century. Social media in the past, you know, the professionals produced and amateurs consumed, is very different. Now you have to get your head around it. These guys own your brand. That little 15-year-old kid with his mum and dad that's visiting you, he can destroy your brand overnight. He can set up a hate Facebook group. You know, you need to be careful, and you need to care. So I think our grandparents would have done well in this era. You know, the baker's dozen, they went that extra mile. You get found out when you care, and you get found out when you don't care very quickly, very instantly. I think it was Jeff Bezos from Amazon that said, you know, in the past, if you had a bad service, 6 people would find out. Now 6,000 people find out. Information spreads very fast on the internet.
Right.
So I think ultimately caring sounds crazy, but it's really basic stuff.
So it's back to almost the kind of traditional values
absolutely.
of making sure that your business does stuff right.
Yeah, caring, and you get found out instantly. It's,
right.
Remember that United breaks guitars, a funny video about the guy, David Carroll, and United Airlines broke his guitar, and they didn't really care. They didn't have to replace his guitar. And he tried to get his money back. After a year, he didn't get his money back. He put a funny video up on YouTube. It went viral. The networks picked it up, and their share price fell. I think it was 15%. It's shareholders, real money, just because they didn't care.
All on the basis of one guy and a broken guitar.
Yeah, there's loads of examples like that.
Yeah.
So,
but it does show the power, doesn't it?
For sure.
That's how quickly that word can spread. But as you rightly say, it can spread in both directions. It can be positive and negative. So the challenge is to make sure it's the good messages that are getting out there because you're doing things right.
Yeah, I think in my days, if I came across something inappropriate in the past, I'd have to write to Esther Ranson that that's live, and a letter, and 3 weeks later she'd receive it, and it might air on television a month later.
Yeah.
I'm in the hotel, there's dirty bed sheets, I have a camera. I'm broadcasting, I'm on Ustream, the whole world can see this, I'm on TripAdvisor, instantly reviewed, I haven't even gone down for breakfast, and it's like, wow, it's a different world.
Yeah, bad news for poor old Esther, really, isn't it? That's her out of a job, really. One of the other things that there's been a lot of information flying around, a lot of speculation is around this whole area of sort of virtual worlds and visualizations. And that seems to be being quite widely used in some areas, particularly from that sort of tourism perspective. Can you say a wee bit about that, visualizations and the kind of virtual stuff?
I think with mobile phones, everyone having a mobile phone, there's lots of apps that are now available that augment reality. They're called augmented reality apps. Some of them are specific for certain companies, travel companies, but Wikitude was one of the first ones to appear. It's a Dutch company, and you point your camera at an object, and it tells you what the object is. It augments the object.
Right.
It tells you some history, some background about the object. There's literally thousands of these applications available now. Very impressive. And again, that new generation coming through, for them, augmented reality is the new reality. That's an expectation. What do you mean it's not augmented? What do you mean it's just, I can't point it at this battlefield, Bannockburn, why can't it come to life?
Right.
I'm expecting it's just a field, so it's not very interesting. Yeah. I want to see what happened.
So aside from bringing maybe like a historical site to life, what are the other kind of clever applications for that augmented reality in terms of enhancing the visitor experience?
There's a lot of fun stuff, but when people arrive in a place, it's easy to arrive, it's easy to stay somewhere, it's easy to leave. When you get there, what do you do? Right. I've never been to Johannesburg, I've never been to Inverness, what do you do? And again, you can point your phone at streets and it tells you this is, these are the restaurants, or this is the nearest, whatever. Yeah, you can find stuff, and you can select what you want to find. I'm looking for attractions, I'm looking for McDonald's restaurants, I'm looking for where I can get Wi-Fi, and it lights up the street. Right. So it's very impressive.
So the challenge then for a business then, does that mean that they have to go out and create some augmented reality app, or is there some way that they can plug into what's already there? How do you take advantage of that?
It's a good question. There's a bit of both. There are sort of frameworks available. There's I believe it's a Danish company, Layar, L-A-Y-A-R, Layar.com, and they provide a basic sort of framework, and you can put your objects in it. So if you own a little museum, you could take photos of all the objects and augment them and add, information, video, anything you want.
Yeah.
But the actual application's there. It's called Layar. So it allows you to do. There's no programming involved. You don't have to hire programmers, which is great.
So really simple to use.
Yeah. If you want to do it really professionally, obviously you get professionals in to help. You can create your own augmented reality apps.
But you mentioned there, for example, going down the street and it tells you where the nearest McDonald's is. That's fine because they're big multinationals and they're everywhere. Sure. But if I've got a restaurant in that street in Inverness, for example, are there places to go to make sure that you're appearing on these augmented reality apps? Or how does that work in reality?
A lot of it. Google have one called Field Trip. It's not known that it's Google, but it's Google behind a lot of companies. It's called Field Trip. It's an augmented reality app, and it picks up the tiniest of places, and all of the information it provided is, again, user generated. It's not them that have written it, it's user generated. They're scraping it from Yelp, TripAdvisor, various sources. Google are good at scraping data and stealing data. So they're scraping the data and providing it on historical, Ravi Burns was born here, or this is a, restaurant reviews, everything. So getting information out there and providing it to lots of sources. Google will scrape stuff and pick it up.
Right.
It's kind of like the Google knowledge graph. You see on the right-hand side, they've scraped all that data from Wikipedia and other public sources. So,
right. So as long as you're out there and getting picked up by Google already, then you'll
yes.
be picked up by that.
Yeah, I remember I mentioned about Google is kind of addicted to fresh content, fresh, up-to-date, relevant content. So your website, Google visits it every night. Oh, nothing new. Oh, just come back every 2 days. Oh, nothing new. And it just comes back less frequently. And like humans, if the website was never updated, you get bored and you lose interest. So you need to update your website. You need to have a blog, essentially.
Right.
That's probably the single most important piece of advice. Have a blog on your website or link to your website and talk about stuff. And the question I get asked a lot about, yeah, it's easy to set up a blog and the secret sauce is to keep at it, but what do I talk about? What's new in our bed and breakfast? What's new in the Falkirk Wheel today? Nothing. It's like, well, actually, there's tons new stuff. And you can use things like Topsy. Topsy.com is an amazing search engine, a social media search engine that helps you find content to share. Because that's what you want to do. You don't have to create your own content. You can find other stuff, retweets and things. And Google, again, under advanced search, finds, I could say, find me all the new stuff in the last hour about Loch Ness.
Right.
Yeah, wow, just the last hour, yeah, just stuff from the last hour, fresh content, and I can share that.
Okay, so it's not, because I think that you're absolutely right. I think that's one of the things that puts people off, is this idea that, yeah, let's have a blog, and I go into the first couple of things are easy to write, but then it's the what do I talk about? Yeah. But your recommendation there is look for fresh content out there and get into that. Two
sources, Topsy, topsy.com, Topsy.com, an amazing search engine. I thought Google would buy it. Apple bought it a number of months ago. It's a stunning search engine.
Right.
And the beauty of that one, and again, the whole thing about social media, you can follow like dead people and dogs and crazy stuff, and it doesn't benefit your business. Yeah. It's kind of just vanity, all these silly followers. Topsy will tell you who to follow. It finds the influencers. It says, oh, you're in the world of whatever, offshore or something, right? These are the 15 people in France that are the influencers.
Right.
I mean, I've got a food restaurant. These are the food bloggers in San Francisco. It tells you who they are.
Right.
Which is really powerful.
Yeah.
And this guy's got 15 million followers. If he mentions you, wow, 15 million people have heard about your cafe in the high street in Inverness, so it's really powerful.
Right. So that was Topsy. I think you said there was another one?
Well, the other one is Google, but it's not just Google is very powerful. It's google.com, and then there's a little button called Advanced Search. Right. And then under Advanced Search, it knows what you're doing. So if you're searching for images, it says, do you want Creative Commons? Do you want small images, larger? You know. But if you're searching for words, it says, do you want easy stuff to share, like reading level, beginners, advanced? That it's like really clever. Or and fresh stuff, just the last hour, and you go, yeah, just the last hour. Right. Stuff about the A9 from the last hour. You go, wow, that's pretty fresh content.
Right. So use the advanced search.
Yeah.
I've often seen that button, but I've never actually been tempted to click it. But
it's
I will
semantic. It's a clever button because it knows what you're looking for. So the options underneath change.
Right.
Very clever.
On what you've searched
before.
Yeah,
very clever. So if it's food recipe things and it says, do you want vegan? You're like, wow, very clever.
Right. That does sound pretty smart.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that one of the kind of standout developments over the last few years is mobile, essentially. Is there not a huge argument that says, Scotland, famous for scenery, out there in the wilds enjoying it, should we not be trying to discourage people from taking mobile phones because that detracts from the experience? What's your take on that?
Yes and no. Somebody talked about digital detox. People do want to get away. They want to opt out. They don't want to be online. They want to be, with nature and the animal, and that's fine. You can do that. And lots of parts of Scotland don't have internet access. So Scotland's a great country for the wilderness and adventure and having fun. But invariably, more and more of the country is being covered by the web. But if you think about it, I own a little shark fishing thing, a destination, and I want to promote that, so I spend money in advertising. It's your visitors that should be promoting it for you. And if they've got internet access, they'll be guess where I am today? Right. I'm going shark diving at the, wow, really? Yeah. In Queensferry, it's like fantastic, live in 3 minutes. In fact, here's the video. It's like this promotion. That's like, I want to go there. That looks fun.
So you do want to encourage your guests to be out there. You do want access.
Yeah, of course. If I'm a visitor attraction on a destination, I want the world to know about it. How do I do that? Well, all these people here are sharing pictures and images and everything. So we've got a hashtag for today. I'd be creating a hashtag for my destination. Right. They do that at weddings now. They say the hashtag for the wedding is, and John and Mary 53 or something, and all the images appear. So
back to that user-generated content again.
Yeah, very much.
Okay. Well, we've got a question here from John, and he's asking, what trend should a small accommodation business look for as a priority? But he's narrowing it down. If you're a small accommodation provider, what trends should you be looking for? What should be top of your list?
Okay. Google provide a tool called Google Trends, right? And what you really want to look for is there a demand for my product or service of a small accommodation? Is there a demand? Where is the demand? It's actually French people want to stay there. I don't know. Is there? I don't know. Do people in Germany or Vietnam or San Francisco who's planning a vacation?
Right.
Google, oddly enough, allows you to search for what people are searching for. So you can find if there's trends, and are the trends seasonal? You can say, oh right, there isn't really anything. Nobody's looking for, in the middle of winter.
Right.
Perhaps. You'll find that out. You can see the trends. So google.com/trends is probably one of the most powerful and underused tools that Google provide. So you're not searching Google, you're searching for what people search for in Google. So everything you've ever typed into Google, they remember it all, and you can search for what other people search for.
Right.
So I type in tents. Does anyone buy tents? And you go, yeah, they do. Loads of people have typed in tents, but it's seasonal. Nobody does it in the winter.
Right.
We're all, it's cold, we don't want to go camping.
Yeah.
But you can change it to New Zealand and you go, hey, they search for tents in the winter. Yeah, it's nice and warm in November, December.
Right.
So you can see seasonality and trends within your business, and you can see if there's demand for your products and services.
Right, so that's Google Trends.
Google.com/trends. Yeah, very, very, very powerful.
Anything else then? Again, specifically looking at it from John's point of view as an accommodation provider. And trends sounds pretty powerful, but are there other things that you think?
I think if you're a little small, not sounding rude, nobody's coming to stay there. That's where we sleep and we fly in a plane. That's how we arrive. We've come to do salmon fishing, bird spotting, whale watch, whatever we've come to. That's why we've come to Scotland. So on his website, I believe that if you're a small provider, you should provide information about what's around you. Hey, we're 1 mile from Loch Ness, and 2 miles away from the RSPB, bird spot, all the stuff around you. Promote all that, because that's what the people are there for. They're not really interested in the bed. It's just somewhere to lie down and sleep. And as much as it's a nice and friendly and comfortable place, that's fine. But they're interested in what's nearby and what can I do with the family, with the kids. So if you're promoting, there's an adventure park and everything, that's great. So promoting stuff around you might sound odd. You think, hey, I don't want to promote them, but that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
You're just a place to stay, and restaurants just a place to eat, and a train station's a place to arrive, but promote everything around it. So kind of joined up. It's tricky to do because, even, I've worked with some of the big tourist organisations, and they're trying to get, Edinburgh Airport talking to National Museum Scotland, talking to, people arrive, where do you go, what do you do? So, I think that's why Disneyland was created, because it's easy to get somewhere, it's easy to arrive, what do you do? Yeah. And he thought, hey, look, you go up here, you do this all organised. It's like, wow, this is amazing. Because people, they struggle with what to do.
So you don't need to think there.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, but that's true. Yeah. They struggle with what do you do? So if I'm at his little place, wake up in the morning, I've had a lovely breakfast, he's a nice guy, I'm going to come back, it's beautiful, no dirty bed sheets, wonderful. Yeah. What am I going to do today? And on his website, I know what I'm going to do. He's told me on the website all this stuff. I can stay here for 4 days at his place. I was going to stay 2, I'm going to stay 4. There's so much within a short drive. So promoting visitor attractions nearby and all the stuff you can do, very important.
Which is kind of interesting, because again, it's almost come back to what people traditionally probably do in these industries. If someone comes and stays with them, inevitably they'll get into a discussion about what are the things to do nearby. But I think the difference here is getting that message out beforehand. Yeah, I stayed in a hotel recently in the States, and I asked about Carlos, the concierge, and they said, we had to let him go. And I said, because he was really good. I used to say to him, hey, where can I get my hair cut? And we're getting, no one used him anymore. They all got apps. And I was like, that's really sad. He was a nice guy, but, times have moved on. That's odd, but there's thousands of apps you can have that tell you things that are on. But so the website should have meant that. They'll have an app, but certain generations may not have mobiles, they may not have apps. So your website should inform them. Right. There's a lot of hotels that they know who their customers are. So knowing who your customers are, that's the Google Trends thing. Is it retired couples? Is it young people? You need to know who your customers are, so you gear up for that customer, if you like. So we shouldn't be surprised if we find Carlos and Esther sitting in a bar somewhere, just with not a lot to do. They've now been made redundant, really. So I was going to say the Citizen M Hotel in Glasgow, on the home page of their website, it's some interesting hotels, a Dutch hotel, and they're growing. And it actually says on the front page that they've done their homework. They know who their customers are. There's no room service. There's no, the staff are called ambassadors. It's auto check-in, and they actually say, if you want to have an affair, come here. They know that's not a family hotel. They've said on the front page of the website, and it's clever. They've done the personas. They know who their customers are. Right. And Marriott have looked at Citizen M and quite jealous of the whole,
you know, they give discount to bloggers, and there's no phones, it's just auto check, and very, very clever social media.
Right.
And they've created a thing called Moxie Hotels, just about to launch MOXY Hotels, and it's actually Marriott. And if you look at it, it's a clone of Citizen M.
Right.
Because they've thought, God, that's quite impressive. They understand who the customers are, they've geared the product up for them.
Right.
So knowing who your customers are, and again, that comes back to quite techie things like, well, we know who our customer, we're a hotel, it's who stays here. No, it's not. It's who's been in the website that couldn't stay there or didn't want to. Right. Maybe they didn't have disabled stuff, or maybe they were Chinese and it wasn't in their language. Or so you can look at Google Analytics and you say, wow, a third of our visitors are Chinese, Asian. Yeah. But only 1% that stay here are Asian. Why is that? Well, they want the site in Chinese. Yeah. They're not going to book, it's in a foreign language, you know. Right.
So use these trends to your advantage.
Yeah, translation's very important, you know, translate, but you can't translate for every site. Yeah. So, you know, who are you after? Is it French visitors, German? You know, target a market and think about that market and what they expect. German people expect things in German, they expect to pay in euros, they expect, a German website perhaps. So translation's quite important.
Okay. Hope's asked the question, this will be a really easy one because you, I think, possibly just missed the story about the share price dropping, the guitar story from earlier on. Okay. Which company was it, she's asking, because she missed that.
Oh, it was an American airline called United Airlines.
Right. So there you go, Hope. It was United Airlines who fell foul of a broken guitar. Got a question from Franz. I know many people who struggle health-wise with the extensive digital exposure, EMFs, etc. How long can this continue? So Franz is coming at it from a kind of health perspective. What's your take on that? That's an interesting one.
I'm not a medical expert, but I've seen tons of reports for and against all of these things. It's like, you know, computer games, they make kids violent. No, they don't. They educate them. But the EMF thing, yeah, it's real. It's, you know, it's radio. And, you know, I think the government recommendations that say, you know, don't hold phones on your head, hold them in, you know, there's all that sort of general advice. It's been, possibly we're going to get a whole generation of children growing up with tumours. I mean, that's horrific to say. I hope not. I sincerely hope not. But it could be the case. I don't know. Nobody knows. It's a relatively new thing, this sort of constantly on a mobile phone. So I've seen all the, you know, absolutely not, it's a complete myth, there's nothing, it's, you know, and I've also heard actually it's very dangerous, so I don't know.
It's a difficult one to actually make a call on, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very real, so.
Yeah. Just come back to some of the questions we'd prepared earlier. How do we actually know in advance, if we're thinking about investing in some kind of digital innovation, how can you measure whether or not that's going to be a worthwhile investment? Is there a way of doing that?
Yeah, I think measuring's always a good thing because you can be really busy with all the social media stuff and having fun, but does it make you money? Is it worthwhile? And how do we measure its success? Again, there's lots of tools that allow you to measure, you know, are we doing well in social media? What's our social influence? You can go into a site called Klout, K-L-O-U-T. There's another one called Cred, another one called Peer Index, and they measure your social influence, how influential you are. And big companies in America look at this. So if I come up to an airline and you go up, you're very connected, you've got thousands of followers, you're on Facebook, you tweet all the time, you get a discount. You get a free upgrade to first class. They look at you, when they're checking you for upgrade, they're looking at your Klout score. Oh, Ian's connected, I'm not, I've got nobody, I don't get the upgrade. So suddenly it becomes really important, your connectedness. But companies, businesses should be measuring, they should be doing social media monitoring, they should be measuring, well, whatever they want to measure, number of followers, tweets, velocity, volume of tweets, whatever they measure on Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus just recently introduced analytics, so it's very new, Google Plus analytics. LinkedIn's got insights, Facebook's got insights, all the social media tools have got tools that allow you to measure. It is very important to measure, you can't just be having fun and having a laugh, you have to know. So you should have a little, even a spreadsheet, a little KPI, key performance, number of followers every month that goes up good, heading in the right direction, quite basic stuff. Yeah, you know, really basic stuff. Yeah.
We talked earlier on though about the idea of perhaps developing an app with a bit of augmented reality. That's maybe a bit more difficult. How would you work out whether that was an investment that was worth making or not?
You can put analysis and insights in the back end of anything. You build it all in, you'd have to program all that, unfortunately, it'd be quite tricky.
Yeah, and the other downside of that is you'd have done it before you could measure it. Is there any is there anything out there, is there any sort of general rough rule of thumb guidance on how do you decide whether developing something like that, making that kind of investment in a piece of digital stuff, for want of a better description. Is there any way of measuring that in advance so you can say, yeah, it's worth investing X thousands of pounds in producing an app for my restaurant?
I mean, it's a lot cheaper now, and there's companies provide the tools. So if you're a restaurant, you know, there'll be things like Restaurant Diary, Top Table, Open Table. There's booking systems, and you just put a little widget on your website and it's done. So you don't have to invent a restaurant booking system. They're all there. You know, you just put the little widget in, so that kind of thing exists. But if it's something you thought of, like there's a gap in the market, what you're saying, but is there a market in the gap? It's like, that's a tough one. You're an entrepreneur, you're a business guy, you've seen an opportunity. There's risk. You know, you go for it, do your homework, do your due diligence, and go, yeah, I believe there's a market in the gap. I've seen a gap, but are people going to use that? And you'll find out if anyone downloads your app. But we talked about SEO and Google being found in Google. You know, page one, really important. Unfortunately, on the App Store, if you develop an app and it's amazing and stunning, it has to be discovered. And discovery, finding an app on the App Store is very difficult. You know, if I typed in anything, there'll be 20,000 apps on that, and you're like, oh wow. So it's really hard suddenly to be found. Very. So it is tough.
Okay. We have to, before we run out of time, we have to talk about this Internet of Objects that you mentioned earlier on, because we were talking about it before, and I think it's quite a fascinating sort of direction that things seem to be taking. First of all, what is it?
At the moment, if you think about what's online, your tablet's online and your fixed PC's online, you know, there's various things online. There's lots of kids' toys now are online. They've got a little internet connection, Barbie dolls, and they can talk to each other. Xboxes are online, Xbox Live. And then you think, well, what else could go online? Well, everything can go online, anything. Your car can go online. It's called a connected car. And eventually cars will be free. Of course, there's no value in a car that's not connected. Because it doesn't have this, it can't communicate, because cars won't have drivers. Probably in 15 years, our government will be debating, should we have drivers? You know, because that's 99% of road traffic accidents caused by humans, and Google with the autonomous vehicles are taking the humans out, and they're much safer. That's absolutely certainly going to happen. But the cars won't just have one IP address. The airbag has an IP address. Everything talks to everything. Everything's communicating constantly. That's happening already. They're designing cars with 600 IP addresses in them, just a car. So when everything goes online, like your pet, and you're online, I think the only things that you can't put IP addresses in, like chips, is liquid, you know. Put it in the bottle. But everything goes online. Yeah, everything is a chip, and everything's aware of itself. So the loaf of bread is aware of itself, and it's got mold inhibitor. It knows it's going out of date, and it says to Tesco, take me off the shelf. You know, oh right, okay, we'll take you off the shelf. So
that's quite
you can print like RFID, you know, codes now, so they're really cheap. You know,
RFID?
The near field chips, you know, it's like a barcode, but an electronic barcode.
Okay.
So,
that sounds as though Jeremy Clarkson might be joining Esther and Carlos in the bar at this rate. Now, we have quite a crowded bar.
Well, I read recently about, you know, governments within 10 years debating about dentists and doctors. So for your son there, be careful about those professions. You know, should we have doctors? Because these robotic things are Google have invested so much in robotics recently. It's bought almost every robotics company in the world. Unbelievable investment. So they learn. Artificial intelligence, it's like chess programs, they're getting better. They're learning, they beat all the grandmasters now. It used to be, oh, do you think they'll hands down, they can't beat them, because they're learning. So.
But just coming back to that Internet of Objects thing, where do you see that going from a tourism perspective? I mean, where are the opportunities for tourism businesses if we get to the point that everything has an IP address?
Well, I'm walking through a museum and everything's augmented, everything comes to life, everything's got its own IP address on the internet, every object, everything, so you can imagine the benefits of that. And you know, I'm not logging onto the National Museum of Scotland, I'm logging onto that picture and who painted it, and it's all augmented, all about it as I walk past it. So it's kind of like iBeacons meets the internet.
And again, we were talking before, you talked about somebody that it was whale watching or something, and the whales were tagged as well. Yeah,
they're online. Every whale, every basking shark, it's the basking sharks as they come up from the Balearic Islands. I did some work with this guy, and he was telling me they're all online, and he's watching them about 5 weeks away, 2 weeks away. Hey, they're about 2 hours away. They've all got names. They're all tagged. It's amazing.
So again, taking that full circle to what we were saying about before, about people arrive in a place and they're looking for things to do. If you're able to say, actually, the sharks are going to arrive in 25 minutes time, you can see the obvious kind of connection. So how far away is, I know you're saying it's happening already, but how long do you think it will be before that kind of thing becomes commonplace?
The Internet of Objects. It's kind of like the internet. It's going to take off everywhere. It's not like, you know, Silicon Valley, and it'll spread out. It'll happen in Indonesia. It'll happen all over the world.
Right.
So it'll just happen. It's happening just now. More and more. There are more things online than people right now.
Right.
There are more objects online. So already.
And
webcams are online. Every street cam's online. Every airport's online. All the street address, all the lights have got IP addresses. They're online.
Right.
You can log on to a light at a JFK runway. That one light, it's got an IP address. Switch it off and on if you have access.
Right.
But big security and privacy issues as well when everything goes online. Because there's a great site called pleaserobme.com, and I just type in somebody's postcode and it says, oh, just let you know Ian's at a funeral this morning.
Right.
Oh, right, that's great. I'll just rob him. Or he's in the Algarve holiday. Fantastic. So there's huge privacy issues by everything being online and people being online. There's huge privacy issues.
Right. It all does sound quite scary, really, doesn't it?
Big Brother's been here for a while, but kind of as a business, embrace that and get a hold of that big data and mine it and use it to your advantage. It's all public. Even our medical records are becoming public. Right. Which is sounds horrific, but they're anonymised, but you can use all that data to your benefit.
So the key thing is making sure you're getting hold of all that information
as much as possible,
and using it as much. Yeah, and there will be more of it from what you've said.
Yeah.
Well, as ever, we've rushed through that and we're kind of running out of time. Before we do go, however, I'd just like to say thank you, Stephen, but we're going to be joined by Katie from Highlands and Islands Enterprise, who's been sitting frantically scribbling notes all throughout our broadcast this morning, as she has done with the last three. Katie, as ever, highlights from what Stephen said, and there's been loads of stuff in there. What were the kind of standouts for you?
I think one of the main points for me was that customers are your brand. So you've got to embrace the user content that they make and really use it for your advantage, because I think that's more important than anything. And there's so much to learn about your customers out there. I never realised how much there was that you can learn, so you can really use that to your advantage and find the right places to be advertising and all the different areas.
And in terms of kind of support and help that's around for businesses who are, maybe struggling with getting their head around all of that stuff and doing things with it, Hi, Scottish Enterprise, Tourism Intelligence Scotland, what kind of things are there that they can tap into?
Yeah, we've got guides on Tourism Intelligence Scotland, the Shine Online guide, which can help you. It'd also be worth having a look at Smart Tourism website. They're actually doing sort of little experiments at the moment with different tourism businesses who are trying out augmented reality and eye beacons and everything, so it's worth having a look at how they're getting on and you could learn from them.
So what was that again, Smart
Tourism.
Smart Tourism,
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. Again, thanks to both of you. Unfortunately, this is the last in the current series, but we will be back in August, so watch this space. We're also going to be joined over the next month or so by Lucy Loch. Now, I'm not going to tell you any more about Lucy Loch at this stage, but she will be appearing and she will be playing a fairly significant part in future webcasts. So you heard it here first. It's not just Stephen that's got all these technological revelations. I can tell you about Lucy Loch. Keep an eye out for her. We'll be sending you out a little bit more information as it emerges. We're having some difficulty just tracking her down at the moment. She's a wee bit elusive, but when we do catch her, you'll be the first to know. So we look forward to seeing you again in August. And again, Stephen, Katie, thanks very much.
Thank you.